Someone's here? Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I don't have this memorized, so I'm just going to read it. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. We're gathered to remember John Dekker. Not as someone who needed the spotlight or went out of his way to win people over, but as someone who lived life on his own terms. John could be quiet and introverted in his later years. Not everyone understood him, and he was okay with that. He didn't need a crowd, but for those who knew him well, they got to see the full picture, a thoughtful, curious, and deeply passionate man. John didn't just dabble in hobbies, he committed. Golf was one of his great passions. He played at legendary courses like Pebble Beach, Cypress Point, and Hilton Head. And he played with purpose, always chasing that perfect shot. Mostly for the love of the game, but also for bragging rights. He earned a black belt in karate, as well as instructed others. He ran marathons, competed in triathlons, including one with his brother Jim, and participated in races all over the country. He even ran the Beta Breakers in San Francisco, and then one year Jerry ran it with him. John was an avid reader. He liked books on the universe, science, history, and novels. He always had a book in his hand until tablets became popular. He was thrilled when Joe and Stephanie gave him an iPad, which he carried with him everywhere. John enjoyed fishing, so he and Jerry bought a boat. He didn't know a thing about boating, so he took a 6-week Coast Guard course. They enjoyed going into the sloughs to fish and had bets on who could catch the biggest and the most. He mostly caught the biggest, except for one time when Jerry caught a sturgeon and he only caught a baby fish. He had a sharp eye for beauty. He loved photography, classic cars, the ocean, the mountains, and most of all, simple moments. He could spend an entire afternoon snapping photos of birds or waves, completely content. John spent a year serving the National Guard. He completed basic training at Fort Ord near Monterey, California, and then went on to the weapons infantry training as well as officers training school. He later admitted that he was a better, more disciplined person because of this experience. Professionally, John was just as committed and accomplished. He began his career in San Francisco selling ads for the Yellow Pages before moving into what became a 40-year journey in real estate. He worked with new home builders across Canada, Georgia, Oregon, Nevada, and California, earning numerous awards as Vice President of Sales and Marketing. Never once to rest on past successes, John eventually launched his own company, Dekker Marketing Services Incorporated, a thriving new home sales and consulting business. He also wrote a detailed sales training manual that became a trusted resource for agents, showcasing his deep knowledge of the industry and his desire to elevate others. John was devoted to family. He cherished both the Dekker and Jerry side of the family. He was always eager to learn about the activities and interests of all the kids and grandkids. Whether through phone calls with Joe or conversations with Jerry after her visits, he delighted in hearing the latest updates about sports or school and sharing in the joy of their lives. But while John had many passions, there was one love that anchored everything, Jerry. Jerry was the love of his life. Together they built a life full of shared joys, traveling up and down the coast, cruising through California and Oregon in their motorhome with their beloved dogs in tow. Whether they were chasing sunsets with a camera or listening to the blues with a glass of wine, there was a quiet rhythm between them. It wasn't flashy, it was steady and genuine. They shared a deep love for music, especially the blues. John even taught himself to play the harmonica and joined a garage band called Tequila Shots. And somehow Jerry even got roped into being the backup singer.
Imagine that.
That was John.
I knew she was the backup. I
She was the singer.
She was not the backup.
That was John, always full of surprises. They spent 3 fun years playing with the band. And of course, their kids, meaning the dogs, were part of everything. John's dog Major, and then later Rocky, Cammy, and Sunny Boy weren't just pets, they were family. Each one held a special place in John's heart. He spoiled them, talked to them, photographed them constantly, and made sure they were always part of the adventure. Later in life, when John's health started to slow him down, he didn't give up, he adapted. He started cooking and found real joy in it. Jerry benefited from many Instapot experiments. He also rode his electric bike all over Rancho Murrieta, camera in hand, still finding ways to explore the world around him. He never stopped being curious. John lived a full, rich life on his own terms with the love of his life by his side and a heart full of quiet passions that never faded. So here's to you, John, you will be missed. We'll remember you not for how loud you lived, but for how deeply you did.
Yeah. Hello down there. For those who don't know me, my name is Dekker. John Dekker was my uncle. I have over here my oldest son Dylan, Jameson over there in the red, and then Jake is my third, and then little Gemma over here. My wife Stephanie, my sister Danielle, and my mom Lorraine right there. We are John's immediate family. Although, Val, you said he was introverted and quiet. That's actually not the uncle I know, but maybe around you guys. For me, in fact, you guys probably know him as John. I do not know him as John. I know him as Rock. He was my Uncle Rock. So as I refer to him, I'm going to refer to him as my Uncle Rock. I also think it's important that we start with a little bit of history because also know my Uncle Rock, you probably haven't heard much about his personal life. And it goes back to his parents and his brothers and their life. And so I just want to give you a little bit of that. So some fun facts about his parents. John Dekker, who he's named after, I call Gramps, born in Haarlem, Holland. Came over in the summer of 1928. When he was 13 years old, he was one of 10 siblings. As a teenager in San Francisco, my Gramps fell in love with his future wife, Vicky Dow, who ultimately became Vicky Dekker, sweetheart of Russian descent, who was actually born and raised in Shanghai, China. And the thing about my granny, and I guess on the fun facts, she spoke English, French, and Russian before she was even 8 years old. So that was John's mother. Gramps was a Golden Gloves boxer. He was actually 6-0 as a professional. If you don't have the picture, you should, framed in your living room. He was also an entrepreneur, and a lot of this came out, towards his later life when he passed, about the different businesses that my grandpa had. Probably the most renowned in San Francisco was called Dekker and Sons. It was on Irving Street. It's now the Happy Crab. I haven't been there yet, but the reviews are great. And it was the first of a kind. You think of Dick's Sporting Goods and all. Back then, it was the local shops. And I've met so many people now that said they bought their first glove at Dekker and Sons on Irving and 20th. My Gramps was an amazing role model. Dedicated youth baseball coach. So he coached my Uncle Rock, my Uncle Ken, and my dad, and all the kids in the neighborhood. And you start to realize the influence that he had on his boys. All were great baseball players, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. He volunteered at church. He volunteered collecting tickets at the Healdsburg football games. He played a mean harmonica, love for the blues and the rhythm, and ultimately passed that on to my Uncle Rock and his brothers, and ultimately Rock, as Val said, was lead harmonica in the Tequila Shots. But the blues definitely, I always remember it with my uncles. It was what they were into, and that all stemmed from my grandpa. And when Uncle Rock passed, and Jerry gave me an amazing collection. You've never seen a collection like this of harmonicas, and these things were made in the 20s. From there was my grandpa's collection that was supplemented with my Uncle Rock's collection. They were made in the 20s in like Germany. These things are like amazing. With when my grandpa passed, I got all his old tapes of him playing. So pretty cool kind of history on the music side for sure. And whether or not my Uncle Rock would admit it, his dad was a major influence in his life. It's amazing how one man, I'm talking about my grandpa still, one man could influence generations, because I think about my kids, and definitely all these things, baseball, music, all has passed down. So one man can influence multiple generations. That is amazing. Now, about my Uncle Rock. Now, from all I've heard, he was a very tough kid, very athletic as well. So in recent days, I was, my dad had recently passed. The year before my dad passed, we did a field dedication. They named it the Dekker Diamond up in San Francisco. And I was able to interview a lot of the old baseball players and people from the 50s and 60s that knew my dad and his brothers. And I interviewed this gentleman, Tom Brandy. Tom Brandy was in the same class as my Uncle Rock at St. Ignatius High School. He also went to grammar school with my Uncle Rock at Holy Name. So he was with my uncle from kindergarten all the way through grade 12. And he told me some fantastic stories. He told me that my grandpa would take the neighborhood kids, he would bring them to the local boxing gym, and he'd put them up in pairs and they'd rotate. And he said for some reason, like the first set of those rotations, he would always get paired up against my Uncle Rock. And growing up in that house, like you just knew how to fight. And he said he would get, and it was like the first of many rotations, and in that very first rotation, he would just get, and my uncle was a lefty, he would just get pummeled over and over, and it would just screw him up for the rest of the rotation. He was all kind of like dazed and confused, and he said he could never even get a punch in against my Uncle Rock. When I interviewed my uncle for that same dedication, he told me, my Uncle Rock told me, and by the way, just interviewing him, I have it on video, it was fantastic to have. He always, his dad always stressed the value of a good stiff jab. And that was a quote that my Uncle Rock gave me about his dad. Tom Brandy also told me that my Uncle Rock had the most natural movement of any pitcher he's ever seen. And again, he was a lefty. There's some pictures, I brought some pictures over there if you guys want to check him out. Tom was an all-city baseball player, and so that meant a lot. Senior year, my Uncle Rock threw a no-hitter, and then came back the very next day and went no hits for 5 innings. And then the guy who broke up literally 13 innings of no-hit ball, drag bunt down the third base line, and that, you talk about something that will piss my uncle off. And I didn't follow through with the story, but he probably threw up and in on the next guy, and that was my uncle for sure. That season, SI won the league championship, and my uncle made all-city. Played in an all-star game at Candlestick Park. Is for those youngsters, that's where the Giants used to play. There's an article in there as well, it's pretty cool, of the all-stars in San Francisco. So my dad, my Uncle Rock, my Uncle Ken were the only 3 brothers in the history of San Francisco to make all-city, one, and then all win the championship on each of their respective teams, and they were 3-4 years apart. So they have a big legacy up in what we call the city. So how do I remember my uncle? I always used to talk with my uncle this. "You're my favorite uncle," and so he would repeat it back to me all the time, sometimes ad nauseum. As a kid, I remember my uncle would wrestle me up. He liked to wrestle. I don't know if he wrestled you, but he wrestled me. And I don't think he knew the full extent of his old man strength because he'd throw me around like a rag doll, but I remember just like giggling and laughing. And it hurt though. He would come, him and Aunt Jerry would come to our house every Christmas. And it was a tradition, stay at our house every Christmas, fun memories. Rock and my dad they wouldn't let us open presents till they ran around Lake Merced. And I always thought it would, yeah, exactly. We were pissed, because why would you wait to spoil us? We're like, kind of adults are you? It took like 2 hours, but it felt like all day. And it was probably like 9:30. We were like opening tons of presents. So that's all good. When I was old, if you fast forward, when I was older, kept the tradition up. Except Christmas was at our house, so Rock and Jerry would come up to our house. Although there was a new tradition, which was Uncle Rock he'd put on a beard and a Santa Claus hat, and he'd have a huge sack of toys. He'd come in as Santa Claus, and of course he would have Santa's little helper, who was like all put together nicely, like whitish hair, like a nice white, that was Aunt Jerry, of course. But I'll get back to that. But he would come in and he'd hand out presents to my kids. Then he'd walk out. He said, "I have more houses to cover." He'd walk out, and I'd see him. He'd be taking off the beard and whatnot. He'd walk back in. "Hey, Uncle Rock's here." I remember summer visits. We would visit my Uncle Rock, my Aunt Jerry, for a week at a time during the summer. We made it a thing every other summer, or every summer. I will say this. This is what I realized. We had a week of tasks, of things we would do. We went to the train museum out here in Sacktown. We went camping. We'd ride the boat. We do all these things. And my uncle would take credit for it. Years later, I realized like my uncle actually didn't do shit. He was all Aunt Jerry. Like it was the whole week of stuff. Like my Uncle Rock would show up every once in a while, but he'd be very selective on what he was. Like he didn't come to the train museum. My Aunt Jerry always made my Uncle Rock look good. Sure, that wasn't always easy to do. We did go fishing on the Delta in that boat. There was one time during the summer we had a field day. We caught, I think it was 8 or 10 catfish. And remember, we came back and he barbecued them up, and it was like an amazing day. We would check the crawfish trap, and he'd put dog food in the crawfish trap, and we literally had like 20 crawfish in there. I'm like, so I go home, I tell my dad, I'm like, Uncle Rock, he knows everything about fishing. This guy is like the fishing guru. Like we got to go out with him. So at a later date, we got my dad out there on the boat. 10 hours. Not one nibble. My dad slept for 5 hours. I started falling asleep. I'm like, Uncle Rock, I think it's time. Like he kept on trying different. But my dad always gave Uncle Rock shit for that. Quick plug, because Rock would want me to say this. He taught me how to fish. He taught me how to drive a boat. He taught me how to drive his truck. What kind of truck was that? It was a big red truck. In Rancho Marietta. I learned when I was like 12, and I was driving this huge red truck, through the streets of Rancho Marietta. Yeah, it was a Chevy. So, anyway, Rock taught me all those things. After he passed, Aunt Jerry gave me a bunch of letters that he had saved that I wrote him throughout the years. I want to It was like 11 or 12. Joe Hammer Time Dekker.
Hammer time.
I didn't come up with that. That was already on the station. Dear Uncle Rock and Aunt Jerry, thank you for letting me stay at your house. It was fun. Thank you, Aunt Jerry, for bringing me camping. We talked about that. Scott's Flat? Scott's, yeah, Scott's Flat. That was real fun. Thank you, Uncle Rock, for giving me $20 to buy cards. That was real fun. Thanks for taking me to the state fair. Just to give you a sense for what we did. Now, this is where it gets real interesting. I also like breaking into Debbie's house and swimming there. I remember that. She wasn't home, there was some miscommunication, we found a way. I also like breaking into Debbie's house and swimming there. I hope I can come back next year. It was fun fishing. I'm glad I stayed at your house. Thank you. See you next year. Love you, Joe. P.S. I was always just mess around with him. I decided to quit baseball and take up the game of golf, which he is a golfer and I was not. Just kidding. But it was fun at the driving range. All right. I will say this. I'm so glad that my Uncle Rock had an opportunity to be really close to my own kids. He was very close with them. He would call us on the iPad. We do FaceTime, and he would ask what the kids were up to, and he asked them a ton of questions. He loved my kids. In fact, I named my third son Jake. Raise your hand. Jacob Rock Dekker is his name. He has no choice in life but to be tough too. Give that name, can't be a cupcake. Now, I will say this: Uncle Rock, many of you know him, was not a religious man. It's quite an understatement, to tell you the truth. But I think there was a higher task at work on this one. Just a couple weeks ago, Jacob Rock played a baseball game up in Yountville at the Veterans Home in Yountville near Napa. It was Father's Day, my mom was there. It was very special because my Uncle Ken had played there, Rock had played there, my dad had played there, I had played there in high school, and now Jake was playing there. Jake was wearing number 7, which was my dad's number. And you know, it's been 15 months since my dad's passing. But Jake's team won that tournament. Jake had a fantastic series. But it was not about Jake or my dad. It was actually about Uncle Rock. Because at that field is where my Uncle Rock made history. As my Uncle Rock accounted for it. He hit the farthest ball of his life there. 425 feet out to left center. And it's a fantastic stadium. He was so adamant that there was still a plaque on the wall for this ball he hit to left center. And he'd say it over and over. In fact, I think Aunt Jerry and my wife Stephanie bought into that one. So still, thousands of kids have played there over the last 60 years, but there's still a plaque on the wall. And so for the purpose of Rock's story and in his honor, and I was up there last week at this historic field in Yountville. I can confirm that indeed there is a plaque still on the wall. It says Rock Dekker, 425 feet on the field. So if you ever go up to Yountville and you're there, check it out. It's great. You might not find it in all that ivy on the wall, but it's there. I found it. And then lastly, I'll say is, Aunt Jerry, you've been fantastic. I did want to tell you there's this time, I was probably 7. But he would no, I don't know if you know what I'm going to say, because he pulled me aside, and we all know Uncle Rock. He was kind of a tough dude, but he had this other side of him that I know, and you know. And he pulled me aside and he's like, "Hey Joe, you keep on referring us to Uncle Rock and Jerry. It would be really nice if you said Uncle Rock and Aunt Jerry." And so every letter I ever wrote, Uncle Rockin' at Jerry, and if I refer to you, Aunt Jerry, I will never make that mistake again. But that was him. That was him. He hit the jackpot when he met you. Last thing. For a guy who's not very social, we're all here. We are, celebrating him. It's actually amazing to me, like our family and your family together, because of who? Because of one man. Now, we should have been doing this a lot more with that man here.
Amen.
But here we are, because that one man, we're all here. So thank you for having us. This is what I.
That's the brothers.
That's all.
Uncle Ken.
Thank you, everyone. We can take a moment if you want, or we can visit and mingle and eat. And if people want to swim, you can swim. Kids want to do this. Yes. Kids were anxious to get in the pool. I don't keep your shirt off.
I think we need boxing gloves.
Talking about the boxing club. That was nice to hear that history. That was
You get the whole thing video?
Very